what I just described, that is not a motivation problem. It is not a discipline problem. It is not even a time management problem. Not really. It is a now versus not now problem. And once you understand what that means, a lot of things about your ADHD brain are going to start making a lot more sense. Hey, welcome back to ADHD and with me, Jorie Houlihan, ADHD life coach, speaker, and your guide for the dopamine deprived. I am so glad you are here. So, before we get into today's topic, I want to ask you something, and I want you to really think about it. Have you ever had something on your to do list for honestly weeks or maybe even months, right? Something you fully intended to do, something that you knew needed to get done, and yet every single day it just didn't quite happen. And it wasn't because you forgot exactly. You knew it was there and you couldn't seem to make yourself do it. And then one day something shifted. Maybe a deadline showed up. Maybe someone was waiting on you. Maybe the stakes got real enough that suddenly you were doing the thing and doing it fast, wondering why why you couldn't just do this 2 weeks ago. If that sounds familiar, and I'm pretty sure it does, I want you to stay with me today because what I just described, that is not a motivation problem. It is not a discipline problem. It is not even a time management problem. Not really. It is a now versus not now problem. And once you understand what that means, a lot of things about your ADHD brain are going to start making a lot more sense. So, we did an episode a while back on time blindness more broadly. So, if you haven't heard that one, you can go back and check it out. I'll have the link for that in the description. Today, we are going deeper into one specific piece of that puzzle. And I personally think it is the piece that explains the most. So, let's get into it. So, the now versus not now framework comes from Dr. Russell Barkley. You will hear me mention him a lot. He is probably one of the most well known researchers and clinicians in the ADHD world. And his work on how the ADHD brain experiences time is, in my opinion anyway, one of the most clarifying things you can learn about yourself if you have ADHD. So, here's the basic idea most brains experience time as a kind of continuous line. There is a past, there is a right now, and there is a future that feels increasingly real and urgent the closer it gets. Neurotypical brains have this internal sense of time passing. They can feel the distance between now and later, and they can feel a deadline approaching. The ADHD brain does not really work that way. For us, time is essentially divided into two categories: now and not now, and not now doesn't exist. That is it. What is happening right now in this moment feels real. Everything else all get lumped into the same undifferentiated category of not now. And not now, as I said, doesn't exist. It does not feel real. It does not feel urgent. It barely feels like it is going to happen at all, even when we logically know it is, right? So think about this for a second. A meeting tomorrow morning and a dentist appointment in 4 months live in the same mental space. Neither one feels pressing until it crosses over into now territory, and now territory is usually pretty close, like alarmingly close. So, Dr. Barkley has described it this way: people with ADHD are not really living in the present, past, and future the way other people are. They are living almost entirely in the present, with the future only becoming real when it is basically already happening. He calls this nearsightedness of time, and I think that's brilliant. And here is what makes this so important: it is not a choice, okay? It is not laziness. It is not that you don't care about the future or about doing things on time or meeting your responsibilities. It's none of those things. It is that your brain is genuinely not registering future events the same way other brains are. The neurological wiring that would normally create that sense of time approaching, that urgency that builds, it works differently in the ADHD brain. So when someone says, but you knew the deadline was coming, why didn't you start earlier? First of all, I'm sure you've asked yourself that a gazillion times, right? But the honest answer is, it didn't feel like it was coming. Not really, until suddenly it was there. Okay, this is the now versus not now experience. And we are going to spend the rest of this episode talking about exactly where it shows up and what you can do about it. Okay, so let's talk about the real world stuff. Because once you know this framework, you start to see it everywhere. Okay. And a lot of things that felt like personal failures start to look a lot more like predictable patterns. So let's start with task initiation, right? Starting things that are not now, now. This is probably the most classic one, right? You have something to do, it is on your list, you know you need to do it, but it is not due right this second. And so it lives in not now land. And your brain just does not engage with it. I mean, you might think about it, you might feel guilty about it, but actually starting it feels almost impossible. This is why so many of us are, quote unquote, deadline driven, right? We tell ourselves we just work better under pressure. It is not that we work better under pressure in some romanticized way. It is that pressure is often the only thing that moves something from not now into now. When the deadline is real and imminent, it becomes present tense, and suddenly the brain can go. All right, let's look at the to do list that never gets done. Here's a pattern I see a lot. Someone writes a to do list and it has 15,000 things on it. And the person looks at all 15,000 things and they all feel equally distant, equally not now. So they either pick the easiest one or most interesting one and ignore the rest, or feel so overwhelmed by the whole undifferentiated pile that they just don't start any of it. This is not disorganization. This is a not now problem. When everything has equal weight and none of it feels real and immediate, prioritization becomes nearly impossible. Right now, let's look at future commitments. Raise your hand if you have ever said yes to something months in advance because it felt so far away that it barely seemed real, and then panicked when it showed up in your calendar. Yeah, I've been there. That is not now, right? Future you said yes because future you felt hypothetical. And now you are current you, and you are not thrilled with past you's decisions. This also shows up with long term planning, saving money, working toward a goal, building a habit. When the payoff is in the future, it lives in not now territory. And that makes sustained effort really hard to maintain. And it's not because you don't want the outcome, but because the outcome just doesn't feel real yet. And there's also the emotional side of this. Here's something I really want to name because I think it just gets overlooked. Living in a world that runs on future planning when your brain is wired for the present is exhausting. Okay. It comes with a lot of shame because from the outside, it looks like you are not trying. It looks like you do not care. It looks like you are bad at adulting, bad at your job, bad at relationships, bad at being a person. And you have probably internalized maybe a little bit of that. A lot of us have. You probably internalized all of that. Here is what I want you to hear. You are not bad at time because you are a flawed person. You are working with a brain that experiences time differently. That is not an excuse. It is an explanation, and explanations are where we start. I will tell you some of mine. So I, like many of you, was always the last minute term paper person, right? Now it looks more like waiting until the last minute to clean my house when I know I am having guests over, or waiting until the last minute to send a response to an invitation or something that's needed in an email, right? Can you relate? I always ask myself, why did I wait so long? Very often, the reason was that it felt like the deadline was way down the road until it didn't. But now that I know this pattern, I have gotten much better at working with it, but I am still a work in progress. Let's be honest. All right. So now that we understand what is happening, let's talk about what we can do with that. And I want to be honest with you, there is no fix that's going to make you neurotypical. You are not going to wake up tomorrow with a robust internal sense of time. That is unfortunately just not how this works. What you can do is build external structures that compensate for what your brain does not do automatically. The goal is to make the future feel real before it becomes a crisis. Okay. So, number one, make time visible. If your brain does not feel time passing, you need to be able to see it. You need to take it from an abstract concept, because it's abstract at best for most of us, right? To something more concrete. And not just a clock on your phone that you're going to glance at and immediately forget. Actual visual representations of time moving. I have talked about this many times. I have a visual timer, right? You want something that is, you're going to want something that actually shows time as a shrinking, in this case, red disc. Okay. There are online versions of this as well. I believe Time Timer is one of them. It is genuinely one of the most helpful tools I have come across for this, because I can see at a glance how much time is left. It's not a number I have to interpret. It is just there, getting smaller. It's super easy. I don't have to think about it. Analog clocks in general tend to work better for a lot of people with ADHD than digital clocks for the same reason. You can see the arc of the hour. You can see where you are in that. With a digital clock, you see only one moment in time. With an analog clock, you see the whole picture. Right? Now let's talk about creating transition alarms, not just start alarms. So most people will set an alarm for when something starts. But if you have ADHD, by the time the start alarm goes off, it is often already a little too late, right? You have not transitioned yet. You are not ready. Now you are rushing. So try setting alarms for before. Think about it this way. I need to leave at 9. So I'm going to set an alarm for 8:30 so I can start wrapping up what I'm doing, and then another one at 8:45 so I know it is real now. So you're essentially creating your own urgency before the actual deadline arrives. So you're creating the urgency before it's a crisis, right? This is not a hack. It is a system, and the difference matters. Time anchoring, I think, is one of the best things we can do. So instead of scheduling things to clock times, which can feel very restrictive or suffocating, and of course, then if we're running behind and you're not going to be able to do it at that time, our brain's going to go, ah, okay, right? So that's exactly what mine says. Ah. Anyway, sorry, I digress. You want to try anchoring them to events. So instead of I'm going to do this at 3 p.m., it is I will do this right after I drop off the kids. I will do this before I make the coffee. This happens when I sit down at my desk before I open email. Clock times live in the abstract future. Events are just more concrete, right? They're more present tense. We have more of an investment in them. So they are easier for the now brain to grab onto. You can also shrink the not now. One of the most powerful things that you can do is take a task that feels overwhelming and abstract and break it down until one piece of it is small enough to feel like now. Not work on my taxes, not even gather my documents. Maybe it is open the folder where I keep receipts, if you are in fact that organized, and look at it for 2 minutes. That is it. That is the whole task today. Now, I know that sounds probably too small to bother with, but here's the thing. When the task is that small, it stops living in not now land and it becomes something you can start now. And starting is always the hardest part. And most of the time, once you start, you will continue. You will not just stop after those 2 minutes. Lastly, external accountability. I can't say enough about external accountability. I know it scares you. I know it does. I know. But sometimes the only thing that makes not now feel like now is another person. A body double, co-working call, a coaching session, a friend you told you would have something done by Friday, right? External accountability creates present tense stakes. And for a lot of ADHD brains, that is the most reliable on switch there is. And it's not a crutch. It is a legitimate tool. It is a strategy. It is smart. So use it. Clearly, I use I use a visual timer for my stuff. And I have gotten much better about breaking things down so I don't feel so overwhelmed by them and it makes it easier to start. But the external accountability, I cannot tell you. I was invited to be in a mastermind. And if you don't know what that is, a mastermind is where a group of people come together, they say what they're going to get done that week, and they will talk about, well, this is what I committed to last week, and this is what I did of it, and this is what I'm committing to the next week. And it is kind of hardcore. Like you need to do what you said you were going to do. And these are people who really want to succeed with whether it's their business or whatever it is. And I was invited to be in one. And the woman who invited me knew my life was kind of like, I'm like, I don't really, I don't know what I want to do. This was before my diagnosis, and I was sort of transitioning in terms of what I wanted to do with my life. And I didn't know. But I thought, she's really smart. She knows all this. She's still asking me. Okay, I'll trust that. And so I called her back and said, okay, I'll do it. And as soon as I hung up the phone, my very first thought was, okay, now how do I get out of this? Because it scared the shit out of me. I had never been accountable to myself. And I didn't want my friend, who I have a lot of respect for, to look bad because I didn't follow through on things. And I was like, okay, just do it, just do it. And so I was very honest in the beginning, and I just said, I'm sort of recalibrating my life. And they're like, okay, well, what are you going to do? And in the beginning, it was a lot of low-hanging fruit, but it was a lot of low-hanging fruit I couldn't get myself to do. But because I made that commitment to them, I was getting it done. And then I was starting to have this sense of accomplishment. And then I felt really good about myself. And then I was sort of looking forward to our meetings because I was like, hey, I did the things, right? It changed my life. And you don't have to go hardcore like a mastermind, but I cannot tell you how much external accountability will help you so much. Okay. All right. Here are some questions I want you to sit with this week. And I mean, really sit with them, not just nod at them when you fold laundry. Number one, where does not now cost you the most? Is it mornings, long-term planning, getting started on creative work, all of the above? For a lot of you, and I am included in this, it's everywhere in my life. So pay attention to where it shows up the most. Number two, is there something sitting on your to-do list now that has been there for maybe a while, and not because you forgot it, but because it keeps feeling like not now? Number three, what would it look like to make that thing feel just a little more real, a little more present, like today? And this one is a bigger question. How much of the shame you carry around time and productivity is actually about character, and how much of it is about neurology? I think most of it's probably your neurology, but I really want you to think about that last one. All right. All right. Let's wrap this up. So here's what I want you to take away from today. The now versus not now experience is real. It is neurological. It is not a character flaw. It is not laziness. And it is not something you can fix by wanting it badly enough, sadly. Your brain processes time differently, and that affects almost everything from how you start tasks to how you relate to the future version of yourself who has to deal with the consequences of this. And knowing that matters, not because it gives you a pass, okay, but because it gives you a starting point. When you understand why something is hard, you can stop wasting energy being ashamed of it and start putting it into figuring out what actually helps. External structure, visible time, transition alarms, smaller steps, accountability, all these things we mentioned, none of these are cheating. They are adaptations. And building adaptations that work for your actual brain is the whole point. Because you're not broken. You just need a different set of tools. Okay, now it's your turn. Where does now versus not now show up most in your life? Find me on Instagram. The link is in the show notes, and DM me to let me know. And as always, if you like what you're seeing here, please like this video and hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. The more people who do this, the more ADHD women we can help. And if you have a friend who definitely struggles with now versus not now time, be sure to share this episode with them. All right. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate it. And if you are ready to stop figuring this out alone and want someone in your corner who gets it, and I mean really gets it, I work with women one-on-one through my coaching programs. So you can apply for a free clarity call to explore if we are a good fit. And the link for that is in the description. This is ADHD and with Jorie Houlihan. And until next time, stay curious.